Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another great show, Perfectly Holistic. And our mission is about empowering cat parents to use more holistic approaches for their cats, their health and well-being. And, nutrition is such a huge foundation for whether cats are healthy or not healthy. And this month in our company, we're focusing on gut health for cats because I think if you get the gut health right, you are setting yourself up for some real long-term longevity and, good health. So my guest today is Billy Hoekman from Green Juju. Thank you, Billy, for joining us. This is going to be a fabulous talk we have prepared for you guys.
Well, thank you for having me. I think you're in Texas, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so here it's snowing, so it's a lot colder here, I'm guessing, than it is there. Although it was snowing near you recently, right?
We're somewhat close. Yeah, today is really nice. It's like 60s, almost 60, and the cats are enjoying some outside in the backyard time, which will not be here next week when it's in the 20s. So I'm like, y'all go play while you can. So yeah, it's quite interesting weather. But yeah, so thank you guys. Let us know where you're watching from. And just a little housekeeping. We are streaming through onto Instagram platform, but we can't see comments through the streaming platform that we use. So if you want to actually drop a comment during the show, come over to our YouTube channel or our Facebook page, and we would love to say hi and welcome you guys to joining us. So, Billy, one of the things that I love about having you on the show is your background in nutrition is probably second to none in a lot of the circles that we run in. You have studied, you have worked in nutrition, you have such a deep understanding of ingredients that go into pet food and what makes it good and what doesn't make it good. So I wanted to start with just a backstory on Green Juju and how you got involved with Green Juju and what your mission is as a company, because I think it really sets the bar high for a lot of pet food companies.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the kind words. I think that comes just from my general obsession with. I was just I'm at a co-working space here, and I was just talking to someone today that 98% of what I think about is nutrition on a daily basis, and
Right.
I don't know if that's healthy or not, but here we are, and so I will have been with Green Juju for 4 years
No
in
way.
June.
Wow.
I know time has really flown by, and when I was leaving my last job, I specifically sought out Kelly, the owner of Green Juju.
Mm-hmm.
And knew that I wanted to work for her. And that was because I saw everything that she had been doing previous to me arriving here. And we had known each other. We'd been friends for about 10 years, but, and I think we'd both kind of, had an admiration for, or at least a collective sense of what the other person was doing.
Yeah.
And when it came to kind of like picking somewhere, I looked at Green Juju and I said, Kelly has brought innovation at every step of the way when it comes to her own product development in developing the veggie blend concept and really perfecting that at the time, and still obviously doing that the best. And then even in when she came out with treats, she was really the first person outside of just having like say a liver treat to do organ-based treats, and then do a really cool concept with different antioxidant colors. And so I could see that, and I could see that that I could help the company go somewhere else. And so my hope and my own vision since I've arrived at Green Juju was to always support that vision that she had. So Kelly steers the ship, and I hope on a daily basis that I can bring my talent to her vision and what she wants for the company. And so far it's been really good. And I think we've released some really cool and innovative things. And that's really important to us. We don't ever put out products for the sake of putting out products. And that's really rare for the pet food industry. You see a lot of the same things. You see a lot of, here's our version of this.
Exactly.
We feel like we have to have an actual reason to do something. Like when we did our food, we did freeze dried food first, and there's a lot of freeze dried foods out there, but we had to have an idea that was totally different. And so, uh, and that's and lastly on that too, as far as Green Juju goes, that's one of the really cool things is we're one of the last indie pet food companies. We don't have an investment board. We don't have,
Yeah.
all of these factors. And so when we develop products, Kelly and I can just do whatever we want and whatever we think is cool at any given moment. And I think we've done some really cool stuff, and I think we have some really cool stuff coming up too.
That's exciting. That's really, really exciting. And you know what? Kudos to you guys for not caving into. I'm sure there's companies that have knocked on her door and said, "Hey, we'd love to invest and we'd love to whatever and partner." And it takes a very special person to say, "No, we're just going to be our own independent, thing, and we're going to honor our mission and our vision and just stick to what we do." And, does that make sense? I mean, you see a lot of companies, like you said, caving to these other companies in order to grow or get bigger or whatever. And I think at some point, the chase for profit tends to outweigh the original mission that a lot of companies, I think, start out with, that are, really good, honest intention and wanting to make a better product and help pets, through diet or whatever. But then somewhere along the way, I think in some cases, they can't do what they need to do without the investment, and I think
Yeah.
that, you can't grow
Well,
with income without money.
yeah, there's a couple things. That's absolutely true. And I think one of the other pitfalls is there's always a lot of companies that approach you as a pet food company and just want to make things for you. And it's
Mm,
really easy to just go, oh yeah, we'll do that. Oh, we'll do this. We'll do that. But
yeah.
in the same sense, those people are also, approaching everyone else.
Yeah.
And so that's where you see that commonality. And so,
Hmm.
we have some really great people that we work with in production. And, uh, I think we, for that reason, I think that's why you see so many different things from us.
Yes, and it's exciting. It's always fun to see what's Green Juju coming out with next, which we're going to get to later in the show. But let's back up and talk about one of the most basic fundamental concepts of what's in products, and that's food versus, that uses real food versus supplements or synthetic ingredients to make their products. So for people who may not have a real good understanding of what the difference is between package A and package B, when they turn it
Hmm.
over and look on the back, one has 5 or 6 ingredients and one has like 10 lines of ingredients. You know what I mean? And they're like, "Oh, well, I see some blueberries on here and I see some, egg and I see this, that." And they don't really understand all the big words. Half the words can't pronounce anyway, So it's like it's hard for people to really understand what they're getting. And then
Yeah.
they don't even understand the concept of, is it balanced, and where do the vitamins and minerals come from, because they don't see the word vitamin or they don't see minerals listed on the ingredients. They're like, "Oh, this is probably not any good because it doesn't have any of this." So, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, here, let me give you what I think is the best, most relevant example of that right now. If you look on the back of a food and you see, say, a bunch of synthetic vitamins, one of those vitamins might be copper. Okay,
Hmm.
so we know that um, copper is kind of a hot button issue right now, and that's
Yeah.
because there was a study done where they did sort of a biopsy of livers, and they showed a lot of more copper accumulation. And remember, this is a random study, so this is like take 100 random dogs in the country. How many of those dogs do you think are on raw diets that don't include synthetic vitamins? Zero of them,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
So the difference, let me outline the difference between synthetic copper as an additive and copper that comes from food. So synthetic copper, the specific form of synthetic copper that AFCO allows in their food is about 90% absorbable,
Mm.
meaning there's a very, very high uptake, and
Yeah.
it's a part of copper. It's a synthetic form of copper, which means it's not complete. The body doesn't recognize it the same. So you have the potential there, and this isn't a proven thing. We don't, around the copper issue, there's more we don't know than we do know, right? I've
Yeah.
actually attended every one of the AFCO and FDA webinars on it, and that kind of thing. But you have this huge absorption rate. Now, when you look at food copper, much like iodine and other things, is attached to other nutrients, but it's also self-regulated by the body. The body
Yeah.
has mechanisms. So there have been actual studies in mammals that have shown that a diet high in copper, an animal that has a diet that's naturally high in food-based copper, will digest as little as 12% of
Mm.
that copper, because
Wow.
there's different parts of the body that say, I don't need this, and then it's
Yeah.
just excreted out of the body. And animals that are deficient in copper have been shown to digest up to like more than 60% of that copper.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and so we don't know what the ramifications are for that synthetic copper. So even there, then we kind of have the holistic industry being like, we need to limit copper. Well, we don't if it comes from food, unless there's
Right.
a genetic abnormality like copper storage or something like that. And so
Mm.
that outlines very, very greatly the difference between a synthetic copper, which you very well might have to be worried about, and
Yeah.
or food-based copper. The other one that's fresh in my mind too is iodine. So if
Yeah.
you take a normal iodine a normal iodine source like we use, kelp,
Mm-hmm.
if you actually take and look at the studies of the iodine absorption of kelp, it's about 10% on average.
Mm.
Okay.
Okay.
Uh, Meanwhile, the iodine that is not, say, attached to potassium in food or another nutrient is going to be much, much higher in the synthetic form. And so this is the reason why you could have an iodine issue in a synthetic uh, food,
Yeah.
wherein this is the same reason why people in Japan eat like 20 times the amount of iodine that they should, and they're totally fine
Yeah.
from seaweed consumption, because of the fact that it's from food. So with food, and you could go case by case down the line. You have all these built-in mechanisms, so it's very, very hard to overdo food, and it's
Yeah.
very hard to not. And just my own little plug for this is, I feel like we're getting too far away from this in the holistic side of pet food. We look at nutrients almost too
Mm-hmm.
much. Hey, how
Mm-hmm.
much copper is in this diet? Do we do this? And we're not looking at the source and the absorption and all of those things, because remember, food has nuance. Food has a ton of nuance, and so
Yeah.
that's what we and they evolved to eat. So I think that's probably the biggest difference for me.
And that's a great point, because I don't think people realize how smart our bodies are and our pets' bodies. There is an innate wisdom that they know what they need to eat. And when they eat foods, like you're saying, the body uses what it needs and it excretes the rest of what it doesn't need. So you don't really have that fear of overdoing too many, absorbing too much, because the body says, oh, wait, I'm good. You can pass it along. Versus a synthetic, it does, like you said, it doesn't recognize it. So therefore it might uptake it and not realize that, it doesn't really need that, because number one, it's not fully recognizable in its form that it's in as a synthetic. So that's
Yeah,
what
and
you're
it doesn't.
saying.
Yeah, and it doesn't have the surrounding nutrients that it has in food, and all of those
Yes.
particular things. And so that doesn't mean we don't have to be somewhat careful. But in the other example I can give you just on nutrient stuff is, raw milk. I've seen animals live for up to 5 years on just raw milk and water and completely thrive. None of that
Mm.
that raw milk is not going to meet any AFCO profile or NRC profile or anything like that. But so that goes back to absorbability, the state those
Yeah,
nutrients are in. All those things are just as important as, say, the amount of those things.
exactly. Teresa says, can cats utilize the nutrients in kelp?
Yeah, so we use that in our diets, mainly for iodine, but obviously there's going to be
Mhm.
fiber there as well, and other sort of antioxidants. We know that cats utilize those as well. So
Yeah, exactly. So I love this, because what I hear you saying is that when it's food, there is a synergistic effect with all the other nutrients associated with that one particular element you're trying to make sure that you include in the diet versus one standalone ingredient by itself that can, it's not tied to other molecules of other, and it's not working synergistically with other vitamins and minerals and chelated forms and things like that that the body can just uptake and go, oh yes, we recognize we love all of this together. Because I
Yeah,
think
and
there is
that
yeah, go ahead.
and that just comes from evolution because
Yeah,
dogs and cats ate those foods and those nutrients came together that entire time. And so
exactly.
sometimes we try to do too much when it comes to vitamins and things like that, even multivitamins and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
um, Food is really the way to go, in my opinion.
No, I agree. And sometimes I run into across some people on social media that are asking questions about, do I need to add I want to add a multivitamin to my cat's diet, and I look at what they're eating, and it's like, well, why would she want to do that? Her food is balanced already. Adding a multivitamin that's probably mostly synthetic is really not going to do any benefit. You get it out of the food. It's more
Yeah,
usable that way.
and there are some, there can be some food versions of those things, but start with the base of the diet and see where you need to go with supplements, is what I always say.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so let's move on to what exactly is a superfood and what makes it special.
Um, there's a lot of different definitions for this. I almost hesitate to ever use the word because you could look up any food online and people are like, this is a superfood.
Right.
For me, if I had to make a definition, I'm just doing this like right off the top of my head here. I would say if it's really good at use, if it's really efficient for the thing you need it to be efficient for,
Mm-hmm.
and if it's uh, a whole food. So here's I would just break this down into groups. I would say that uh, animal foods like meat and eggs and milk are superfoods for
Mm-hmm.
fat and protein
Yeah.
and fat soluble vitamins and the things that they're particularly good at. Things like, say, veggie blends, or things like uh, plants, low carb plants, if we're talking about for dogs and
Mm-hmm.
cats, are going to be good at fiber and
Mm-hmm.
antioxidants and other vitamins and minerals, particularly water soluble ones, and also um, just general phytonutrients. And
Yeah.
so I would say if we're classifying anything, I would just say in groupings, if we're using the things like they should be used for, then that would be like a superfood in that range. Um, More than just like this food is a superfood. Because if we're talking about superfoods, it's like reproductive foods like eggs and milk
Yeah.
and things that are both biodense and also really easy to uptake.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes we get lost in the idea that because, so here's a great example in dogs and cats, because their diet is supposed to be primarily animal products, meat, etc. We
Mm-hmm.
get the idea that that's more important than things that make up less of the diet. But I don't think that's inherently true, because we were just talking about vitamins. Vitamins are a very small part of the diet by
Yeah.
percentage. Um, but that doesn't mean that they're not equally as important as that protein or that fat or whatever else you're getting from the meat. And so we can take smaller things like some of the things we'll talk about when we talk about the GI and gut health and
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. You can take some of
Mm-hmm.
these smaller supplemental products and they're just as important, but just in different ways.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. Um, so let's move into gut health. So cats, and since we're mostly a cat audience here, so
Hmm.
there's just like dogs. I know cats, there are so many cats out there that struggle with GI issues, whether it's vomiting, whether it's diarrhea, whether it's skin allergies, any kind of an immune system chronic issue is really a gut health issue. Microbiome, dysbiosis and things like that. that that lead to these conditions like IBD that vets like to label, and um, you know, they're just not, they're not putting weight on, or whatever the case might be. Cancer, I mean, let's talk, whatever the condition might be, I think you can pretty much tie it back to gut health on some degree. So what are some of the ways that we can help support our cats gut health using real food instead of having to go to all of these supplemental type of products?
Well, I feel, well, number one, I feel like I keep doing this and then this light keeps shining. So I apologize for that. I
No,
didn't
you're
plan on
good.
that. I'm really
Yeah.
good at technology. So it's actually interesting because I think cats are kind of in need of more help with this than dogs. And I say that because
Mm,
they're out, that most cats don't go outside. Most cats
right.
are inside their entire lives. And
Mm,
one of the big missions at Green Juju is to go back to this, the the microbiome or the microbial world of the forest and of the farm and of
mm,
outside generally, because we
yeah.
know that dogs and cats evolved in an environment where they were constantly around dirt and they were constantly
Mhm.
around all of the microbes that come through that. When you look at, and I promise this is going to relate back to cats, but I have to give a dog example here.
Yeah, go for it.
When you look at the four oldest living dogs in the history of, in recorded history, from 27 to 31 years old, the commonality between them is dirt. So
Mm,
it's they slept outside, it's they lived in a rural community, or they lived on a farm.
yeah.
It's that aspect of it. It's the reason why kids who grow up on farms have less allergies and less asthma and are just generally healthier. It's because
Mhm.
they're, subjected to that. And so again, going back to cats, when you're inside all the time, that's a huge problem. And so what we do at Green Juju is we have some currently we have some food based uh, whole food probiotic supplement products, which use wild fermentation. And by the
Mm,
way, we have gotten a lot of great feedback on these from cats, and in terms of palatability, which says a
yeah.
lot because a wild fermented product, is going to be high in acetic acid, and that acetic acid is going to smell like pickles and that kind of thing. But we've had a lot of cats, especially with our new mushroom probiotic. So what we
Nice.
do is we utilize something called wild fermentation, which means you're not inoculating it with something. So like yogurt is yogurt because you use yogurt cultures and
Mhm.
inoculate them into that yogurt, and then those cultures grow. What we do is we take mushrooms or beets and purple cabbage and we put them in a salt brine and lower the pH. And once the
Mm,
pH lowers, then all those wonderful bacteria that exist within the vegetation or the fungus, when it comes to the people kill me when I call mushrooms plants. Sorry, people. I get emails, etc. So when you the fungi and the plants, you get those inherent bacteria. And there you don't just get a supplement that you're using, you get hundreds and hundreds of different bacteria. And
mm.
that doesn't even tell the whole story. So it will be dependent on the plant itself, the
Yep.
soil, be dependent on all the animals that are on John's farm when he ferments those things. It'll be dependent on the time of year. So
Mhm.
you get different probiotics in every bottle or container, but then as it sits in your fridge, it changes again. So
Mm.
what'll happen is you'll start with all this diversity, and then after a week, some of those cultures start to grow more, and some start to die off, and you get these
Oh,
different
wow.
reactions. So that will change. And in the second week, it'll change more. In the third week, it'll change more. And in the next time you get one of those, it'll change differently because it's
Interesting.
unpredictable, because
Yeah.
it's food. And so you get all of these different kind of health benefits. It's like you don't even have to rotate products to
Yeah.
rotate through all of these bacteria. And these are the soil-based probiotics. These are the probiotics, the healthy yeast, all of these things. And so it's been our goal for a while, and especially partnering those with some of the blends for fiber, to get more of these into dogs and especially cats' diet. So
Mhm.
if you were, watching this and you said, "Hey, my cat has a really great raw diet," or I just want to make a positive change and they're eating a processed food. If you were to say, "I'm going to use Bam's Beets
Yep.
and the wild fermented mushroom probiotic," um, you would be getting hundreds and hundreds of different bacteria. I mean, up to more than probably 500 species of probiotics in each of those, and some of those would overlap,
Yep.
but a lot of them wouldn't. And so that you'd go a long way in terms of what you were talking about at the beginning, which is getting their gut right. And that
Mhm.
goes back to diversity as
Yep.
opposed to one or two things. So
Yep.
like for me, for example, I eat a lot of, obviously I ferment a lot of things at home. I eat a lot of fermented foods. I take a probiotic when I travel
Mhm.
because I realize I'm not going to eat as many fermented foods. And I've noticed it helps me with the flying and stuff like that. However, when I get back home, it's back to my homemade yogurt and that kind of thing. And so I think animals are exactly the same. Like the answer to, hey, my cat doesn't get enough bacteria because they live inside, isn't here's 5 bacteria in a pill.
Right.
The answer is that can help as well. I have no problem with if you want to diversify at the base of the diet and then throw in different probiotics, right? There's other companies
Mhm.
that make great probiotics. Um, but let's at least start with food and start with,
Mhm.
sort of nature's microbiome, essentially.
No, that's great. Stephanie says if you add your cat, um, okay, hold on. Let me make sure I read this. If you add your cat have lived in if you and your cat have lived in mold, would this be okay? I've heard that you can treat mold allergies with fungi, and I've heard the opposite. So I think that's we're talking about food versus like a detrimental kind of fungus mold in your home or whatever. Two totally different things. One obviously you want to ingest and one you don't, but talk about that.
Well, there's never going to be a downside to diversifying the microbiome,
Yeah.
and especially with um, if you've lived in mold and had issues with that, you want to populate the gut and the skin microbiome, all those things with as many bacteria as you can. And we know that there's a link there. We know that there's a link between what's going on in your gut and what's
Yeah.
happening on your skin and
Yes.
a lot of other issues like that. And
Mhm.
so I would say in this case to go ahead and do that. And if for some reason, if you're talking about mushrooms specifically and you didn't want to do that and you had some issue with that, you could also do Bam's Beets, which would help as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Um, okay, so have you worked or had a pet or worked with other people that have had pets with gut issues, and how did you how would you go about introducing healthy gut changes with food apart from perhaps the fermented mushrooms? Obviously fermented foods are a huge part of that.
Mhm.
Can you give us some other examples of other fermented foods or other foods that would be a good place for cat people to start with?
Yeah, that's in that intro question. I haven't been asked that in a very long time in terms of working with. I've worked with, I don't know, thousands and thousands of people over the years. I really like being in the. I used to do more individual consultations and things, but I really love making things, at
Mhm.
Green Juju with Kelly, and then having those things filter out to the people who work with people, in those individual cases. I think that's a really fun place to be in. The other part that plays into this too, and this is applicable to cats as well. You're going to use less, and they're also, since they're obligate carnivores, they're not going to take as much. But the fiber part is incredibly important for these microbes to
Thank you for
thrive.
saying that. Yes.
And so our veggie blends are applicable to cats in that sense. In fact, I was just doing an event couple weekends ago, maybe even I think it was last weekend. I travel a lot, so it all kind of like runs together. But I was doing an event with Dr. Keith Weingart, our staff veterinarian, and he was talking specifically about cats and the fiber and the blends. And we just announced last month a new blend, which is our Vitality blend. And now with all of those blends, if you rotate between those, you have 23 different plants that could get into your dog or cat's diet. Now, that's important because we know that the hallmark for a good microbiome is eating a bunch of different types of plants. Doesn't mean it's going to make up the majority of their diet, but we do want to rotate through those. I think cats being very, very low carbs, I think you could start with just greens and Bailey's blend. You could stay there if you wanted to, but I still think you could also mix in smaller amounts of the other two blends as well, especially, the new Vitality blend. So when you look at those things, I think that that's equally as important as those fermented foods. And again, that goes back to whole foods and not getting particularly stuck into one concept. Because, even when you look at, well, I digress on because I was going to say something about fermented foods, but I'm switching here. So because those foods need something to eat, right? Those foods need to, and the other part too is, remember that the bacteria you get from food and that you feed from food don't stay, right? They only last on average like 1 to 3 days. And so you want to be able to continually kind of re-inoculate, because there's two sets. There's the ones that are always there and that will live, like, if you do like a fecal transplant or something like that. And then there's the ones that help on a daily basis in the same way, but you need to continually, and that's why, you're getting them from food. So I would say the blends there are equally as important.
That's very good. I'm glad you brought up the whole fiber thing, because I don't think people realize, even as cats, and let me say this, like people who feed raw, they may not have a fiber source in their raw diet recipe. Or they might buy a commercially made wet food or something like that, and there's very little fiber in that food, and then they wonder why their cats get constipated or have problems down the road or have gut issues. So I don't think people think about fiber when it comes to cats.
Well, and I think it's a good way to look at it is every dog or cat is going to be an individual in terms of their nutritional needs.
Yeah.
So when you look at that, you're not talking about like when we make a commercial food, Green Juju food is complete and balanced for dogs and cats. But that doesn't mean it works in its base form for every dog and cat. And so one of the reasons we formulated that to be so simple is so you can add the blends. So I think the gold standard for this is, if you're getting on the food, pick a blend, start rotating through them, and see what works best for your animal. Here's a great example. My dog Huckleberry gets our food, obviously, and he also gets a veggie blend and 1 psyllium husk tablet. And I figured out that if I mix the veggie blend with that 1 psyllium husk tablet, that is his kind of like sweet spot for exactly where his fiber needs to be. And it took me a little while, to figure that out. But I like that because he gets the condensed fiber as well as the blends, which are and I rotate between all of the blends. And so he gets, that diversity as well. And so any cat owner can say, okay, I'm going to go on to Green Juju food, and then I'm going to get one of these blends, and I'm just going to start small and work up to the amount where I can see that the stool is the consistency that seems the healthiest.
Right. Stephanie says, which one do you think has the highest fiber of those blends? Are they about the same?
They're all pretty similar.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say I would say that they range, but they're all similar enough to where one isn't like, this one's really, really high in fiber and this one's not. And so because it just depends on the type you're looking at. Like in the in the golden blend, you're going to have more fiber from, say, like squash and golden beets, wherein in the other ones, you're going to have things like kale and
Yeah.
dandelion greens. And those things are going to be much lower in carbohydrates, but also still very, very high in fiber.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because Teresa has a comment here, and I love this. She says, it has been my understanding that cats cannot utilize the nutrients in fruits and vegetables. They don't possess the enzymes to break down the cell wall of fruits and veggies. They have to get these enzymes from their prey. I think there's a little misinformation there because the vitamins and the nutrients and the fiber in the fruits and vegetables, especially we're talking low glycemic foods, have so much benefit. Can you talk about that, Billy?
Yeah,
Versus
well,
like starches, absolutely cats do have zero requirement. And then also talk about the actual amount that we are actually talking about. Like we're not
yeah.
talking about adding a whole, bowl of fruit salad to your cat's food or
Mhm.
anything. We're talking
Well,
like
there's like a couple things there. So there's a difference between being able to utilize those nutrients because they can't break down the cell walls versus being able to utilize those nutrients because they're obligate carnivores and can't make those chemical conversions.
Mhm.
So they can't utilize, for instance, beta carotene to make into vitamin A. Cats just can't do that. Dogs and
Mhm.
humans aren't very good at it either, but cats can't do it. So that would be one way they can't utilize the nutrients in fruits and vegetables because they need retinol vitamin A, which is from animals. Um, I would say that's the idea that cats can't break down the cell walls at all or very well is true in dogs as well. And so that's why in Green Juju, we do that for you. As far as I know, we're the only one who does this. And this goes back to when Kelly created these blends. We juice them. So that completely breaks down the cell wall. And then we
Mhm.
add the pulp back to the product. And then we further mix it. So you're breaking all of those things down, but still keeping all of those blends in a raw food state. So they'll be able to take the things that we know they take. So another thing about that is I just said cats can't utilize beta carotene to make vitamin A. We know that, but cats can utilize beta carotene for its antioxidant properties.
Mm.
So those are two different things.
Yeah.
And so with this, we, for instance, take the food and we break down the cell wall, and they're absolutely going to utilize the fiber. And that's kind of why I said that they're not going to take everything that dogs can take, but they are
Mhm.
going to take those things that are sort of needed in the diet. And you're talking about starting, depending on the size of the cat, you're talking about starting with a couple teaspoons to a tablespoon for the whole day, and then just seeing where you go from there. And by the way, if in that case, we do have the freeze dried version that we released of all of these things now. So
Mhm.
if that's easier for cat people because they're using such a small amount, or you can refreeze it in ice cube trays or whatever you want to do, if
Yeah.
you're not going to use the whole 15-ounce frozen container. And the freeze dried versions contain coconut fiber as well, or flour as well, which is going to be also a really,
Right.
really efficient fiber source. So all of those would work
Yeah.
as well.
And I love it how can also the role of the fermentation, doesn't that also help the digestibility and absorption in
Yeah.
the gut?
So if you're using the fermented products, basically what happens is those bacteria eat the thing for your cat, and what
Mhm.
happens there is not only is there the probiotics, but you also get the
Mhm.
prebiotics via the say in BAM's beets, and then you also get the postbiotics, which means those are those like dead bugs and also those processes that happen because of the bacteria eating it. And one of
Mm.
the byproducts of that, one of those postbiotics, is enzyme production.
Mm.
And so basically you're injecting into the diet more enzymes, but that could be very directly comparable to the stomach prey or the stomach contents of their prey. because what's happening there, they're pre-digesting it. This is exactly the same thing. It's just the bacteria are eating it instead of the, say, rabbit.
Yeah, that's very cool. Susie says, do you have some insight on how to handle cats that have such a degree of inflammation that they either vomit raw food or lost their appetite completely and won't eat?
Is it, well, I guess my question would be, is it just raw food? Is it just I mean, if your cat won't eat at all, that's definitely time to contact a veterinarian and seek medical attention for sure. But there are other options outside of raw food for cats. If it's specific to the raw food, if it's there's cooked options. There's there's a ton of other options out there that I think are great. There's a lot of companies that do cook food really well.
Yeah, and even if you wanted to start out with like a gently cooked or a freeze-dried version and just do that for a while and build their gut, and then maybe over time they'll be able to handle more of the raw food. Maybe it's just they need a transition period. What do you think?
Yeah, I think especially cats that have been on a diet for a very long time, especially a like a processed, like very moisture removed diet would need ample time to transit. And I think a lot of times they force that on you when it comes to cats because they have such a hard time, and part of that hard time is because a lot of those products have chemicals in them specifically to make them addictive to cats.
Yeah.
That's a real thing. And so I would say a transition can work really well. And there's, I don't espouse to know exactly how to transition a cat. I don't have a cat, so I can't tell you how to transition one. But there are people who know a lot more about that, as far as transitioning, that I have a lot of respect for. So definitely, either whether it's whether it's consulting a professional or getting some crowdsourcing information, I think there's a lot of options, and we don't have to be completely rigid in raw and this and that, and I fed my dog a sardine from a can this morning. So there's some cooked food for you right there.
Yep. And I feed my cats sardines from the sardines and water in a can. So every day of the week. So it's true. And I like how you said start small, and you guys, you can even start smaller than a teaspoon. You can start with a quarter teaspoon. You can, cats have some cats are very finicky with their taste and they're very particular. So start really small and just slowly increase it as they get used to that new texture or that tiny different flavor that's being mixed into their food so they don't completely get turned off on it. Plus, if your cat has a real sensitive stomach or, sensitive gut, then you want to start super slow in introducing these good things. And just make sure that they're not going backwards in the process. As long as the stools are, normal and not getting worse, you're going at a good pace, and just take your time introducing some of these really beneficial gut loving foods. Annette says, what's the difference between the freeze-dried powder and the frozen blends for cats, and which is preferable?
So there's some small changes. If you're talking about the veggie blends, there's some small changes in the ingredient panel. Some of the ones that are freeze-dried, the ones that are freeze-dried have specific nutrient additives that we can't really do in the frozen. That just goes back to like a legal definition of what a supplement is versus food and all this stuff. But so the Just Greens has nettles. Bailey's Blend has cleavers, which is kind of like a nettle-like plant, which kind of works, in cohesion with that. Golden Blend has bee pollen, which is another really great way. This is in the freeze-dried version, which is another really great way to introduce the environment into your cat's diet, because bee pollen is literally the environment. It is the outside, right? And then I want to say it's right, astragalus. Did I say that right? Okay.
Astragalus,
Astragalus. There you go. See, you said it better than I did. here you got my name right, and I got that wrong. So you have one up on me.
No,
So
no.
so each one of those has that additive, but other than that, it's just kind of small changes between the freeze dried and the frozen. So either one of those is going to be a great option.
Yeah. So let's talk about your products. We kind of danced around some of them. Do you have any there? Any samples or packages that you could show? I don't know if you have any.
I don't. I am
That's
ill
okay.
prepared. I'm in a conference room here, and but
Yeah.
I can make an exciting announcement about our about something.
Okay, go for it. Yeah.
Uh, we are going to be updating our food, both our freeze dried food and our frozen food, has always been complete and balanced for dogs and cats, but it's always been labeled for dogs. So
Mhm.
that's the only thing. So we are changing that. We are going to be labeling that for cats, and we are going to have the cat feeding amounts on there,
Awesome.
and the AFCO statement and all that. So that will be. I know that you cat people need it to say cats, and so
Yeah.
we have kind of turned the corner on that. So that's going to be coming out soon. In the
Yay.
meantime, if you have a cat on our food, just feel free to email me if you need that information. Um, as far as the feeding amounts go. So that's I guess kind of our newer thing. Everything we make is applicable to cats. We have bone broth. We have
Mhm.
which can be a great way to rehydrate freeze dried foods. Freeze dried food, which is the same formula or recipe, I should say, as our frozen food. Uh, Freeze dried food is a great segue for cats
Yes.
because you can feed it to them not rehydrated, and they
Mhm.
kind of understand what it is. And that's way, even though there's moisture is devoid in both those products, or not devoid, but is reduced significantly, the freeze dried food is going to be so much better for them than the frozen food. And then you can work on sort of like rehydrating that.
Yeah.
Um, and so, like I said, if you go, even just go to our website, you can see kind of the products there. But and the other thing to mention too is we have a treat line, our Whole Food Bites,
Yep.
which are we have basically we pair organ meat with different antioxidant color sets. So like bison green is kale, dandelion greens, and kelp. And when you look at something like that, it's really cool because you get all of the nutrient density of those organs, but then you also get the nutrient density of those antioxidants and that fiber, and those are extremely palatable to cats as well.
Mhm.
Um, that's really surprised me when I first started working at Green Juju, and to the point where we actually have a vet program now where we send veterinarians uh, glass Green Juju treat jars for their exam rooms, and then we send them monthly treats to fill those jars with for vets in our vet program. And so, we can have some of those cats that I know cats tend to get a little more stressed out when they go to the vet, and
Yeah.
we can give those cats a little bit better time, with those treats.
No, and I will speak from personal experience when I've either picked up samples of your treats or bought them at the store. My cats do love them. So, and I'm kind of like you when I was reading the label. I'm like, okay, there's this, but the plants in there, I don't know if they're really going to like that too much, but let me tell you, that was not even a question. They did love it. And that's great
Well,
to know. And whether you want to use them as treats or crumble them as toppers onto your cat's food to introduce things, oh my gosh. Share the flavors or the names of the treats. I know there's Bam's Beats, and then there's a salmon one that I actually have in there, and I can't remember
well,
what it's called.
so Bam's Beats is a fermented supplement.
Okay, yeah,
So
yeah,
as far as the treats we have, you're gonna test me on this because I'm gonna be like trying to remember what they are.
that's okay.
We have beef red, bison green, duck orange, salmon blue, pork pink, and goat purple.
Okay,
And then we also have single ingredient treats. We have salmon trainers, we have bison
okay,
liver trainers, and we have rabbit trainers. Those are just single ingredient treats. So we have
Right.
So the other thing too is, if your cat likes several of those, you can kind of rotate between those treats, and
Mhm.
they're a good price for, I get the small bag for my 28-pound dog, and that's almost a month's worth of treats right there. And
Yeah.
so uh, that can be a really low carb addition to your cat's diet, even if you don't make any other changes.
Yeah, and it offers a little bit of fiber and it offers the antioxidants in it, which is great.
Hmm.
Um, we have a question from Stephanie. She says, "Any worries with the bird flu and raw food, like how your process is?" Any
Well, yeah, there's a couple things on that. We really put our, if you go to our social media too, we did do a post about this, and I can clarify that somewhat. We only have one poultry supplier, because we only have duck liver and duck. We have duck orange treats, and we have rabbit with duck liver food. And so all of those birds are being tested at the flock level. That's pretty, if you're using meat that is USDA, then they're going to be tested there. So that's
Yeah.
kind of the first step of it. And then the second step is we do use high pressure processing, which there is no study for H5N1, but there are studies with other avian flu viruses, and it does show inactivation of the avian flu virus generally. And there's nothing about this virus that would make it really any different. And so, we can say that with a high degree of certainty that that is a really great safety step, to
Mm.
be able to do that. So we, like everyone else, are evolving with this issue and with what people are, wanting us to do safety wise and that kind of thing. But we knew that we were putting out healthy products uh, when this sort of happened. The other thing I want to stress to people is, and this is in our post as well, is that there is currently no test for food at the commercial
Mm.
level. So what happened was people were like trying to find a test because that would be the easiest solution to this problem. But the
Right.
only test that was available, actually validated test is what I should say. The only actually validated test is through the federal government and through
Mm.
state officials. We at Green Juju expect commercial labs to have one of those very soon. And then the good thing for companies to do, I think, would be to just test for it at the food
Yep.
level in batches.
Yeah.
So basically, what that all boils down to right now is no reason to believe it's not safe now, and we're gonna roll with the punches and uh, get on board with that once it's actually a thing. And I don't think people will have to wait too long to do that.
Yeah.
So.
And you guys, can you talk about the frozen and the freeze dried line that you have that cats can eat? I can tell you that I have used the lamb products with my cats before for the dog food. Um, what other proteins do you guys carry?
So we have beef. So in freeze dried, we have beef, bison, pork, lamb, goat, and rabbit with duck liver.
Okay.
And then we have all of those but bison in
The
frozen,
frozen.
and that's because we just don't have enough sourcing for the bison.
Yeah.
And all of those are very, very organ rich, and we do that on
Mhm.
purpose because that's how we can have such a limited ingredient panel. So our beef food is
Mm.
just beef heart, beef liver, beef kidney, beef bone, organic kale, and organic kelp. That's the entire ingredient panel.
Wow.
Um, and it's a complete and balanced food. And so we do that because we take out the muscle meat in that
Mhm.
case and we replace it with heart, which is way more nutrient dense. You also get a really good, like, infusion of all those heart-based nutrients like CoQ10 and that kind of stuff. You
Mm.
don't have to supplement with that stuff because it comes from the food.
Yeah.
Um, and uh, and then 99% of the vitamins are going to come from, say, the kidney and liver in that. And then all we had to do was just add a little bit of a dark leafy green and kelp for iodine,
Mhm.
K1, some other vitamins there. Um, and then we wanted to make this for sensitive dogs and cats, if that's all they can go on.
Yeah.
But then obviously it's, like I said before, it's limited enough. It's only 3 ingredients from an allergy perspective, or 4 if you're using the rabbit with duck liver. So it's limited enough to where you can say feed our other products and not have to have any, and you're not going to mess up the nutrient profile.
Right. That's awesome. Um, and that's it's interesting that you guys don't use the chicken and the turkey, which is under so much scrutiny right now with all this, flu thing going on. So that's really good to know. And I didn't realize that your recipes didn't have the muscle meat and it was more the organ stuff, which is fascinating. That's really cool.
Yeah, well, some of them have a slight bit, but they're
Okay.
all either only or a majority. So
Okay.
like our pork is going to be, it's like pork heart, pork liver, and so
Okay.
there is some muscle meat, but
A little.
yeah. So that's where I go back to thinking outside the box. We didn't
Hmm.
think of we don't look at any nutritional premise and go like, well, this is how people have done it, so we have to do it this way.
Right.
And the results we've had with this food, the freeze dried's been out for um,
Couple
basically
of
2
years.
years,
Yep.
and then the frozen we came out with last year has been incredible. And
Yeah.
we did do in the dog world, we did do a feeding trial on it this year, an AFCO feeding trial as well. So we now have, and we went above and beyond in that, and then we did midway blood work as well. So we now have blood work too, to show like we know how this reacts in dogs beyond just the formulation.
That's so cool. Can you tell us where people can get your products?
So our products are the best place to buy them is at locally owned independent stores. That's
Okay.
actually where you'll get the best price. That's where
Mhm.
you'll get the buy 12, get one free. We
Mhm.
are all about supporting our retailers, and we're all about putting money into the local economy. It's
Love
very
it.
important for me personally because those are the people that actually know what's going on in the pet food
Mm.
industry. Those are people that you can talk to and ask and get education from. And that becomes important because there's very little regulation in pet food. But for
Yes.
those of you that can't find a store, um, we do sell from our website. That's the only place we sell from online. And so you will, because, and that we have to do because we understand there's people who we get people all the time who are like, the
I
closest
can't
store
get
is
it.
3 hours away from me.
Yeah,
Uh, and so it really just depends. But so either of those two are an option.
that's awesome. And I would be remiss if I finished this show without talking about the goat's milk from Green Juju. Just how amazing goat's milk is for gut health and as a complete food. Can you talk a little bit about the farms and the goats that y'all get your meat, your milk from? And
I think this is the only time in my entire career that I didn't bring up goat's milk in an entire interview. So that's
we're
kind of
not
kind
leaving
of
until we
hilarious.
talk about it.
Yeah. So we get the best milk in the world. I'm here right now in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and we get all of our milk within most all of it is within 2 hours of me. I personally inspect all the farms every year to
Mm,
look for all of their certifications and their pasture and their enclosure and to get to know all
yeah.
those farmers. And a lot of those farms, I'm out there more than once a year, but um, and those certifications include certification for human consumption, which means
Mhm.
we go through the same rigorous testing that raw milk for human consumption that could be on a grocery store shelf here in Pennsylvania. Because here in Pennsylvania, you can just buy it at a store
Nice.
for, at like a grocery store. So our milk, though we're selling it to dogs and cats, we go through that certification to make sure it's the best possible product. So it goes through that to where, it could be on a human grocery store shelf. And simply put, it's just the most complete food on the planet. It has everything we've ever discovered in nutrition. And on top of that, all of those things have a specific factor in them to be digested 100%. It's the only food that your cat will get 100% of the nutrients at all times. Um,
Mhm.
when they consume it, it has, one study I was looking at showed that raw milk has over 3,000 different probiotic species in it. And
Fascinating.
um, so you have this super diverse yeast and probiotic species, and it's like bringing the farm into that bowl, and it contains every digestive enzyme and cofactor ever discovered. And so it's really just the silver bullet of nutrition generally, where you can just kind of be like, here's a base, and you're not going to miss out on anything if you're consuming this. And so great for cats all around. And there's a reason. It's funny because you go back, 100 years, and it was the cat drinking the milk. There's a reason, because it used to be really healthy, and that's kind of what we've brought back.
Yeah.
Is raw milk versus pasteurized milk.
Yes, it's awesome. And if your cat has gut health issues, the Green Juju goat's milk is an amazing way to help them transition to a better diet, to a better food, help bring some balance into that. Even if you just put a tablespoon, into their food a day to start with, and you can, slowly increase that to maybe, 1.5 or 2 a day. It doesn't take a whole lot. And I heard this, Billy, tell me if this is true. I think you said this, that throughout the year, the goats are grazing on different grasses and plants. And so the diversity of what's in the milk, the probiotics change. Is that correct? Throughout the year?
Yeah, the probiotics as well as the nutrient content, everything. But the probiotics are dependent on the goat's genetics. They're dependent on, does that goat like to be outside more? Does that goat like to grass-fed is an interesting term when it comes to goats. Goats don't love grass. They love long grass that has like seeds and stuff on top of it. But they'll eat like bark and everything else, and they like feed. So it depends on, does that one like feed more than grass? Does it, it also depends. One study showed on the temperature of the grass. So that bacterial makeup changes there. So basically throughout the year, you're going to get different bacteria sets, or even to that farm. Because there's a study that shows that when they took raw milk and tested it for different bacteria, that they found those bacteria in other parts of the farm. So they were just, essentially getting into the milk. And that's where you go back to that concept of getting all of the farm into that. And so every carton you have, so with a cat, I imagine it's like a pint carton that you're getting. So every pint carton that you're getting, you're going to get all of these different goats that are mixing their milk together, and they're going to have, each one of those goats is going to have different nutrient profile, different bacteria profile. And so it's almost like rotating through it. And the other part I'll mention too, that's very cat specific, is our milk is not fermented. It's just straight up raw milk. And so I think a lot of cats actually like that better, because they didn't love the sort of fermented taste of fermented raw milk. And so we get that feedback a lot. So
that is so interesting. Well, my cats love it. And I'm out. I need to go get some more.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you buying our stuff.
No, absolutely. I just like to add different things into their foods and rotate different things. And, it helps diversify their gut, which, that's the whole point. Even though they're on really good, balanced, raw food, I still like to bring different things in and introduce, in a rotation kind of thing, different treats, different proteins, different whatever, just because it helps, I don't necessarily go get their poop tested all the time, but I see their poop and it's like this big, it's very small. There's not much there. And they're so healthy. Exactly. Yeah. And it doesn't smell. It's just amazing. Like, wow, why didn't I know about this 20 years ago when, but I didn't. Now I do. So anyway, do you guys have any other questions before we wrap things up? This has been so interesting and so helpful. And we've had some great questions over here from everybody.
I will say one other thing, not that I can say anything about what they are, but we do have some, we never stop at Green Juju or, take breaks or anything apparently, but we do have some exciting stuff coming up, in a couple things in the rest of the year. So if you like Green Juju and you enjoy what we do, I think all the cat owners will be very happy about those products.
Yeah. So follow you guys on social media. You're on social media, right? Yes.
Yeah, of course. We're on everything. So.
Okay. Good. Any ideas, like a timeline when we should pay close attention?
I can't tell you that.
Okay.
I don't want, so normally sometimes when we do these, we have, so Kelly and I, we have what I would call the third person in our triangle, which his name is
Yep.
Antoine, and he's our VP business development.
Okay.
And sometimes we don't want to get in trouble with Antoine. So I never know what I should say. So I will say this. If he sees this, he'll laugh about that. But if he, I would say just kind of follow us, and we make a pretty big deal out of when we do, and we always do
Yeah.
lives, and Kelly and I describe what the items are and why we do them and etc. So
Yeah.
if you just follow us on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, you'll know about those things.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. And thank you guys for watching, and share this information out to anybody that has a cat or a dog, because, it can help them too. So anyway, Billy, thank you so much. And we're so excited to see what's coming down the pipeline for Green Juju this week. And I'm going to get to the pet store and get my replacements.
All right. Well,
This
thank
weekend
you,
too.
and I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Y'all take care. We'll see you again soon. Thanks, everyone.